miles an hour. That's hurricane force winds. That's why you've got areas like that huge swath behind me of trees literally ripped out of the ground by big chunks of wind coming down to the ground level. The researchers actually suspected that the fire created tornadoes. In one of the campgrounds, there was a big 40-foot shipping container full of building supplies. They found that shipping container a kilometer and a half away in the middle of the Athabasca River. The winds were strong enough they had picked it up and thrown it that far. So this was quite the event. It all started on July 25th at about 6 o'clock in the evening. I was driving an evening wildlife tour that night, and I'd taken my group up the Moline Valley to go look for moose. We were coming out of the Moline Valley down a hill just above us here called Oh My God Hill. I actually said, oh my God. I could see at those cliffs behind me this huge plume of smoke, so I knew that we had a wildfire. Well, we came around the corner, started up to Jasper, and I looked south and I saw 2 more big plumes of smoke. So we had 3 wildfires. In fact, we'd had a thunder and lightning storm pass over top. Didn't drop any rain, but there were multiple lightning strikes. And they started those fires. And the one fire to the east shut down the highway to Edmonton. The 2 fires to the south shut down the highway down to Banff. There's only 3 ways in and out of Jasper. And so the moment I saw that fires to the south, I knew a mandatory evacuation was coming. I told my people on the bus, get your stuff, get out of town as fast as you can, try and beat the rush. Well, I've got everybody dropped off. I'm heading back to the compound, drop the bus off, and my phone starts going, wow, wow, wow. You know, it's the mandatory evacuation alert. So I dropped the bus off, ran home, threw everything I cared about into my car, my photo gear, my kayak, and my mountain bike. And I got to the end of the alley to get in line to get out of Jasper. That was about 10:15 in the evening. I got out of Jasper 300 meters further at 2 a.m. That's how long it took for me to go 300 meters, because we were evacuating the 4,000 residents of Jasper and over 20,000 visitors that were here at that time. It was quite something, but it went really well. It's something that we have practiced in the fire department. It was very well organized. People weren't getting upset because you could see things moving. Yeah, it was only once every 10 minutes your line would move forward on the car lane. But, you know, you knew that they were having 4 timbers right down one road. Basically about 40 km/h bumper to bumper traffic heading west. But we got everybody out safe. No major injuries, no big accidents, nobody died in the evacuation. But just imagine the town to the west of us, Valemount, 800 people. Middle of the night, so there's 25,000 people descend on your town. Yeah, the people in Valemount were amazing. Everybody opened their houses up. Everybody pulled out their spare sleeping bags and their cots. They opened up every building in town. You know, there were a whole bunch of people in the school. Everywhere they could put people, they put people. I called up a friend that I quite often stay with out there, and she says, yeah, I got 27 people in my house. So I said, don't worry about me, I'm wide awake, I'll keep driving. I drove all the way up to Kamloops. The next day at 4:30 in the afternoon, I'm watching the fire come into Jasper on the news. So, you know, our evacuation was declared finished at 6 a.m. in the morning. So, literally under 12 hours later, the fire entered Jasper. So we got everybody out just in time. And a friend of mine in the Jasper Volunteer Fire Department was a wall of flame. They measured 200 feet tall, 70 meters tall, that entered the town of Jasper in 2 locations on the south side of Jasper. And for the next 48 hours, nobody got any sleep in our volunteer fire department. The only reason they stuck around, that they didn't just run, was the fact that they had 7 other towns' fire departments there with them. 7 other towns had sent crews and equipment out to help try and preserve Jasper. It's the only reason we have any town left. We should have lost the whole town with how absolutely wild that fire was. But they did an amazing job. We lost 1/3 of the town, but they preserved 2/3 of it. and they kept the core. We had a hospital to come back to, we had schools to come back to. So, kind of the core of the community is still there. So we could restart the town later on when we all got back. We were evacuated for over a month. It was the 29th of August before they let us come back to Jasper. And when I drove into town, visibility was under 100 feet, maybe about 30 meters. That was it, because the fire was still burning out of control. There was still a lot of fire on the landscape. It's just it had been pushed back enough away from the highway and the railway and the town that they felt it was safe for us to return. The fire wasn't actually put out until winter arrived. Our first snow in early November is what put the fire out. So yeah, it burned from the 25th of July all the way until the first week in November. It was quite the fire, quite the experience for all of us that were here. Now I'm one of the lucky ones. I had a home to come back to. A lot of my friends lost their homes. And it's been quite the journey for them, dealing with insurance companies and trying to find contractors, rebuild.
Done that with hurricanes and
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say you guys deal with lots of disasters down that way. The only major disaster we face here is wildfire. We're actually a pretty blessed location. In the mountains here, we're far from an earthquake zone. We don't get tornadoes and normally, except for fire, tornadoes or hurricanes, all that kind of stuff. But fire is the major disaster that we face. So we got it. But fire's a natural part of the landscape here. There's a fire every 2 or 3 years somewhere in Jasper North. It is something that's happened naturally forever. What's different is how we humans are altering the landscape. For over 100 years, we have been doing fire suppression. So that thick green forest you see on the other side of the valley behind me, that's not natural. It exists because we've been putting out wildfires for over 100 years. And the forest filled the valley bottom. If you go back 150 years, the valley bottom was 50% open grassland. That was the natural landscape because fire would burn down a part of the forest. But the meadows stopped the fires from ever getting too big. So this fire was really big in large part because the forest filled the valley bottom, and then the only spot for young trees to grow is between the old trees. So it, for the last few decades, has just gotten thicker. There's so much fuel that the wildfires that burn today are so much wilder than they would have been as recently as 30 or 40 years ago. I actually ran the fire committee for the town side of Jasper. I was on town council for 3 terms back in the 90s and 2000s. And back then, we were planning for wildfires that generate 70 to 100 kilojoules per square meter. Basically, it's how much energy the fire would put on the landscape. They were measuring energies in excess of 800 kilojoules per square meter in the wildfire 2 years ago. So basically almost 10 times stronger and wilder than what we've been planning for 25 or 30 years ago. So, it's a much more dangerous landscape today. And we paid the price. Now, you may have seen those trailers that said people that lost their homes so they could come back and get to work. But there's a huge camp of those trailers south of Jasper down the campground. That's not for residents. That's for all the contractors to come in here to rebuild Jasper. And even with that, they figure it's going to take 5 years. We can only rebuild 70 to 80 buildings a year with the number of contractors we've got room for. So it's going to take a while to rebuild Jasper, but we'll get it done. The insurance industry says it's going to cost over $1 billion. So it's not going to be cheap. But in the long term, it's going to be a positive. It's going to be a big positive for the park because that thick old forest is not good habitat for any of our animals or birds. It's so thick, very little sunlight gets down to the ground. Very little food grows in the heart of that forest. Where's all this burn zone? Wide open. There's already more food for animals in this burn zone than in the old forest. So over the next couple of decades, we're going to see a real boom in our animal population here. That excites me. It's one of my favorite places to go is Yellowstone National Park. And
Same thing.
yep, and
Because I lived in there.
yep, and they had the fires back in the late 80s. I was reading their 30-year report a couple of years ago, and they were saying that 30 years after the wildfires in Yellowstone, the number of large animals on the landscape was 10 times higher.
And you can see them.
Yeah.
And everything started growing.
Yep. Yeah, I know. I love it down there. Now, for the park, it's going to be a good thing. And we're trying to turn it into a good thing for the town. You know, take a disaster, try and make lemonade out of the lemons. We have totally changed our building requirements. Now, you don't get to build these nice cedar shake roofs that are absolutely horrible to fire. You basically have to have a fireproof envelope on your house. And people are understanding, yeah, it's probably a good idea. We've also changed our zoning. We're trying to get people to rebuild to a higher density. That way there's more accommodation. Because accommodation for people who live in Jasper has always been an issue in Jasper. I always remember when I got on town council, I was researching it and I found a letter from 1929. A railroader had come to Jasper and was complaining because for 2 years he'd been living in somebody's garage. There's the only spot he could get to live. So, accommodation has always been an issue in Jasper. We probably won't solve it, but we're definitely moving things in the right direction. We are seeing people rebuilding to a higher density, partly because everybody had different kinds of house insurance, and some people discovered they can't get back what they have. And so they're putting a duplex or a triplex onto what used to be a single family lot. And that way they can afford to rebuild bigger, have more space for themselves, and have a nice income for somebody they're going to rent it to, or potentially sell it, have the money to build it. So it's, in the long term, I think it's going to be positive for the town in that respect. The big negative for the town is we've lost a whole generation out of Jasper. You know, the young people that become the core of your community in the future, that have kids that go into the schools, those people in their 20s that were meeting the woman of their dreams and settling down. We've lost all of them. You know, they all had to go somewhere else, and they all found jobs somewhere else, and most of them haven't come back. You know, I lost a lot of good young friends that haven't come back and probably aren't ever. So we're going to have to rebuild that part of the town. So that's going to be a difficult thing in the long term. But that's what disasters do. They can be challenges. How do you deal with them is a big question. Now, I mentioned we got everybody out safely, no deaths. But we did have one death in the fire, one human death. Unfortunately, a young firefighter from Calgary had a tree fall on top of him about a week after the fire started. So we had one human death. And in case you're wondering about the animals, we had 5 animal deaths. That's it. Parks Canada surveyed the whole burn zone the spring after the fire. They were going around with infrared cameras trying to see if the fire was underground anywhere and was going to come back up. And they found the carcasses of 5 large animals. That's it. 1 bear and 4 elk. That's all that was killed by the fire. And the big animals are smart and they're fast. They were able to get away from it. Now small animals, yeah, we lost all of them in that area. They're already moving back in. They reproduce fast. In terms of our population of big animals, the fire didn't have a big impact. But in terms of where those animals are, it did have a big impact. The elk came right back into the burn zone. All of this grass growing there is perfect elk. They love what are called sun-tolerant grasses, the grasses that grow in the correct sunlight. The bears, on the other hand, I saw less bears last year than any year of my life. There just weren't any bears around. Because not only did they leave the burn zone, they left the valleys beside where the burn zone was. You know, they were all a long ways away. We didn't have very many come back last year. But this year, we've seen quite a few come back. Still not to the numbers we normally see in these valleys, but at least we have a few bears now. Different animals have been impacted differently by the
这块当年那个交警。
那就是，
看半天才到。